The alleyway was Elias's sanctuary, a narrow, forgotten slice of concrete tucked behind a bustling market district, its air perpetually thick with the mingled scents of rotting fruit, stale exhaust fumes, and the damp, metallic tang of urban decay. At just 12 years old, Elias navigated this forgotten world with the quiet, practiced ease of a phantom, his small frame often overlooked amidst the surging tide of city life. He wasn't just a beggar boy, though the crumpled dollar bills that occasionally landed in his outstretched hand were his sole lifeline. His true currency was his mind, a sharp, inquisitive instrument that absorbed every detail, every nuance of the human drama unfolding around him. He possessed an almost preternatural ability to observe, to process, to connect seemingly disparate pieces of information, a skill honed by years of silent, solitary survival. He often sat hunched against a grimy brick wall, its rough surface cold against his back, a tattered, patched blanket pulled tight around his thin shoulders, even in the warmer months, less for warmth than for the illusion of invisibility. His breath would sometimes fog in the crisp morning air, a fleeting testament to his presence. His only constant companion was a worn, charcoal-stained sketchbook, its pages filled not with childish doodles or innocent fantastical creatures, but with intricate, almost hauntingly realistic drawings. Sometimes he'd sketch the tired, hopeful, or desperate faces of passers-by, capturing their fleeting emotions with an uncanny accuracy, their wrinkles, the subtle twitch of a lip, the unspoken burdens in their eyes. More often, he'd draw hands, gnarled with labor, elegant with leisure, calloused with hardship, trembling with age, fascinated by the silent stories they told, the lives etched into their lines. Other times, the pages held astonishingly detailed anatomical sketches, muscles rippling under skin, bones connecting with precise articulation, tendons stretching and contracting, all rendered with a precision that utterly belied his age, his lack of formal training, and his impoverished circumstances. This was his secret world, a talent blossoming silently in the shadows, nurtured by an insatiable, almost obsessive curiosity that set him apart from every other street child. His charcoal was his voice, his observations, his language. His hunger was a constant, dull ache, a familiar companion that rarely left him, a low thrumming in his stomach. He survived on the kindness of strangers, the hurried deposit of a few coins, the occasional discarded pastry found surprisingly intact, or the meager earnings from his pavement art. He'd meticulously draw intricate patterns or detailed cityscapes on the grimy concrete, hoping to catch the eye of a sympathetic passerby. The cold bite of the concrete through his thin, worn clothes was a familiar sensation, a constant reminder of his tenuous existence, while the relentless cacophony of the city, the blare of horns, the distant sirens, the rumble of subway trains beneath his feet, the shouts of vendors, served as a strange, oppressive lullaby to his solitary life. Yet, surprisingly, he rarely felt true despair. Despair, he instinctively knew, was a luxury for those with something significant to lose. Elias had only potential, a vast, untapped reservoir of intellect, observation, and an indomitable spirit that he honed daily, watching, learning, analyzing the intricate dance of cause and effect in the human world. He ate in silence, often a cold, half-eaten sandwich found surprisingly clean in a park trash can, meticulously dissecting its components, imagining the hurried movements, the indifferent thoughts of the person who had discarded it. This harsh, unyielding routine, though brutal, was his peace, his known world, a fragile ecosystem of survival. Miles away, cloistered amidst the gleaming glass and steel towers of the city's elite financial district, lived Julian Thorne. A titan of the tech industry, his name synonymous with groundbreaking innovation and immense, almost unfathomable wealth. Julian commanded an empire built on cold logic, relentless ambition, and a ruthless pursuit of efficiency. His penthouse, a sprawling minimalist expanse of polished concrete, dark wood, and panoramic windows, offered breathtaking, unobstructed views of the city lights, a glittering, vibrant tapestry of human endeavor that stretched endlessly into the horizon. Yet for Julian, this opulent world had become a gilded cage, a cold, silent monument to a success that felt utterly hollow, profoundly meaningless. His 8-year-old daughter Amelia, his only child, the very core of his existence, his greatest joy, had been slowly, inexplicably, losing the use of her legs for the past 2 relentless years. The insidious progression of Amelia's mysterious condition had defied every medical diagnosis, every experimental treatment, every cutting-edge machine known to modern science. Julian had spared no expense, consulted every specialist from New York to Zurich, flown Amelia to the most renowned clinics across the globe. He had marshaled his vast resources, leveraged his formidable network of contacts, bringing together a veritable army of neurologists, orthopedists, geneticists, and rare disease experts, all working in concert, yet all ultimately failing. Her small, once nimble legs had grown weaker, her movements more labored, until she was entirely confined to a wheelchair, her bright, vivacious spirit dimming visibly with each passing month, replaced by a quiet, heartbreaking resignation. Julian would often find himself in Amelia's lavish, sun-drenched room, a space filled with untouched toys, silent board games, and books she could no longer reach, silently watching her sleep, her small, fragile body a painful, constant reminder of his utter impotence. He, a man who could bend markets to his will, reshape industries with a single decision, felt utterly, hopelessly powerless in the face of his daughter's illness, a vulnerability that gnawed at his very soul. He would sit alone in his sprawling living room, the city lights shimmering outside, a silent, indifferent spectacle, but his gaze would be fixated not on the dazzling panorama, but on the small, unoccupied wheelchair meticulously positioned by Amelia's bedroom door, a stark, silent monument to his overwhelming failure, a constant symbol of his crushing inability to fix the one thing that truly mattered. The silence of the penthouse, once a cherished symbol of his hard-won solitude, now echoed with the unbearable, suffocating quiet of a father's profound despair. One unusually warm autumn afternoon, the city's afternoon rush hour was at its absolute peak, a cacophony of human and mechanical noise. The streets were a snarled tangle of exhaust fumes, the metallic tang thick in the air, and blaring horns, an impatient symphony of urban frustration. Julian, en route to yet another dead-end consultation with a newly discovered specialist, found his armored limousine stalled in gridlock just a block from Elias's usual spot. Impatient, agitated, and utterly drained by the endless cycle of false hope and crushing disappointment, he glanced out the tinted window, seeking a momentary distraction from his internal torment. His eyes, usually scanning for market trends or business opportunities on digital displays, idly registered a scene on the chaotic sidewalk. An elderly woman, frail and bent with age, her face a map of countless wrinkles, was struggling visibly with 2 overflowing canvas bags of groceries. Her hands, gnarled with arthritis, trembled uncontrollably, and suddenly, with a sickening rip, one of the flimsy bags gave way, spilling oranges, apples, and milk cartons across the dirty pavement. The vibrant colors of the fruit seemed tragically out of place against the grimy concrete. People hurried past, their faces averted, their expressions blank, lost in their own worlds, stepping carelessly over the scattered groceries as if they were invisible obstacles. Julian watched, a flicker of detached pity, a fleeting, almost academic observation of human indifference stirring in his chest. His chauffeur, ever vigilant, was already reaching for the door handle, likely to offer assistance, a standard protocol for maintaining a pristine public image. But then Julian saw him. A small, thin boy, no older than 12, emerged from the familiar shadows of Elias's alleyway. His clothes were ragged, patched in countless places, his hair unkempt and dusted with street grime, clearly a child of the streets. Julian braced himself for the inevitable, practiced plea for money, perhaps even a swift, opportunistic attempt to snatch a piece of fruit from the scattered bounty. Instead, the boy moved with surprising grace and quiet purpose, a blur of motion against the static indifference of the crowd. He knelt quickly, his bare knees hitting the cold pavement without a flinch, gathering the scattered groceries with remarkable efficiency and gentle care. He didn't speak, didn't ask for anything, didn't even meet the old woman's eyes. He simply collected the items, his small hands working deftly, placing them carefully back into the woman's remaining, still intact bag. He even retrieved the broken milk carton, its contents seeping onto the pavement, and handed it to her with an apologetic gesture, as if he was somehow responsible for the mess. The old woman, initially startled and disoriented, then overwhelmed with relief and gratitude, fumbled in her worn purse for a coin, a token of thanks. The boy, Elias, waved her off with a small, shy smile, a fleeting warmth in his often guarded eyes, a spark of pure, unadulterated kindness. He then simply melted back into the shadows of the alley, as silently as he had appeared, leaving the bewildered and grateful woman to her relief, a brief, benevolent apparition. Julian, watching from the soundproofed cocoon of his limousine, felt a strange, unbidden stir of something. Not quite admiration, for he was not prone to such overt emotions, but a recognition of pure, unadulterated decency, a simple act of altruism in a world he increasingly saw as purely transactional, driven only by self-interest. He hadn't seen the boy's face clearly, just his small, determined back and the undeniable flash of genuine kindness in his actions. He made a mental note, a fleeting thought to perhaps have Liam, his head of security, look into providing some anonymous aid to that particular alleyway, a quiet gesture of corporate social responsibility. The car finally lurched forward, breaking free from the gridlock, and the boy was instantly forgotten, his brief appearance subsumed by the more pressing, soul-crushing anxieties surrounding Amelia. But Elias was not merely a passive observer of the streets. He was an active, diligent student of life, of humanity, and of knowledge. His hunger for understanding was as profound, as insatiable as his physical hunger. Hidden beneath a loose, chipped floorboard in his alleyway sanctuary was a small, invaluable collection of discarded books, medical textbooks salvaged from a university dumpster, their pages yellowed but their diagrams intact. Old, intricate anatomical charts found near a hospital's discarded supplies, even a tattered, obscure copy of a book on ancient healing practices and holistic remedies from a forgotten corner of a second-hand shop. He spent countless hours poring over these texts under the dim, flickering glow of a faulty street lamp, or by the pale, unforgiving light of dawn, his eyes devouring every word, every diagram. He traced the pathways of nerves, memorized the names of bones and muscles, studied the intricate dance of tendons and ligaments. He was particularly drawn to cases of neurological disorders, of conditions that defied conventional understanding, of the body's mysterious failings. He saw patterns, connections, where others saw only chaos, his mind weaving together information from disparate sources. He dreamed not of wealth or comfort, but of solving puzzles, of fixing what was broken, of understanding the complex machinery of the human body, a silent ambition that burned brightly within him, a hidden legend waiting for its moment to emerge from the shadows. His greatest fascination, however, lay with the children who occasionally passed through the busy city hospital that bordered his territory. He'd often observed them from a safe distance, hidden amongst the dense bushes that lined the hospital grounds, their parents' faces etched with worry, their hopes clinging precariously to medical promises. He had seen the quiet desperation in the eyes of mothers, the strained, almost broken smiles of fathers, the slow, agonizing decline of hope. And he had seen Amelia. Her room, on a lower floor, offered a partial view of the outside world, a small, brightly lit square of her privileged, yet tragically confined life. He'd observed her over the past few months, a silent, unseen guardian, the slow, heartbreaking decline in her mobility, the increasingly frequent sight of her in a wheelchair, the grim, unreadable faces of the doctors emerging from her consultations, and the profound, crushing sadness that seemed permanently etched on her father's once powerful face during his visits. He knew her symptoms with an almost clinical precision, matching them to obscure case studies he'd devoured in his discarded textbooks, cross-referencing with his keen observations. He even had a theory, a wild, improbable hypothesis born from his unique blend of formal medical knowledge gleaned from forgotten books and raw street-level observation, a connection no one else seemed to make, a possibility so unconventional it would be immediately dismissed by any established professional. His legend, though unknown, was silently stirring. The stale, antiseptic air of the hospital clung to Julian Thorne like a shroud, a constant reminder of his crushing powerlessness. He walked the hushed corridors, his expensive leather shoes echoing faintly on the polished linoleum, each step heavy with a despair that felt almost physical. He had just emerged from another agonizing consultation with Amelia's team of specialists, a collection of the most brilliant medical minds money could buy, yet their collective wisdom had produced nothing but platitudes and grim pronouncements. Amelia's condition, they explained, was accelerating. The muscle atrophy was progressing rapidly, threatening not just her mobility, but potentially her respiratory functions, her very ability to thrive. They spoke of irreversible damage, of palliative care, of making her comfortable. The words, clinical and detached, felt like ice shards piercing his heart, tearing at the last fragile threads of his hope. Julian, a man who once thrived on control, on meticulously engineered outcomes, felt his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. He had always believed in solutions, in the power of intellect and resources to overcome any obstacle. Now, standing in the sterile glare of the hospital lobby, surrounded by the quiet hum of medical machinery and the hushed whispers of worried families, he was confronted with the brutal truth. Some things, even for a man of his immense power and wealth, simply could not be fixed. He clutched his phone, its screen dark, a million unmade calls to doctors, researchers, and venture capitalists echoing in his mind. He had offered fortunes, established foundations, promised unlimited funding for any breakthrough. Nothing, absolutely nothing had worked. The profound futility of it all was a suffocating weight. He felt a deep, wrenching emptiness in his chest, a vacuum where joy and expectation for Amelia's future once resided. The city, normally a vibrant symphony of ambition, now felt like a cold, indifferent monster, mocking his impotence with its endless, glittering lights. He needed air, a brief reprieve from the oppressive atmosphere of medical despair. Ignoring his driver, who stood respectfully by the waiting limousine, Julian strode out of the main entrance, pushing through the revolving doors. The late afternoon sun, already dipping below the skyscrapers, cast long, distorted shadows across the pavement. The city noise, usually a comforting backdrop to his thoughts, now seemed to press in on him, a discordant symphony of horns, sirens, and the endless chatter of passing strangers. He walked aimlessly, his tie loosened, his eyes unfocused, drawn to the quiet stretch of sidewalk bordering a small, neglected park adjacent to the hospital. It was on this very stretch of pavement, bathed in the fading golden light, that Elias was meticulously finishing his latest charcoal creation. He had been working for hours, his small, nimble fingers smudged with black, his brow furrowed in concentration. His drawing, a surprisingly intricate and lifelike depiction of the city's oldest cathedral, its Gothic spires reaching for the sky, was nearly complete. A few pedestrians had tossed coins into his overturned cap, admiring his talent with fleeting smiles. Elias, accustomed to being ignored, barely registered their presence. His world narrowed to the textured paper, the play of light and shadow, the steady rhythm of his charcoal against the grit. As Julian stumbled along, lost in the labyrinth of his own despair, his path intersected with Elias's small, makeshift art gallery. Julian wasn't looking, not really. His mind was miles away, wrestling with the terrible prognosis for Amelia, replaying the doctor's grim words. His foot caught on something unseen, perhaps a loose cobblestone, and he pitched forward, stumbling awkwardly. His hand, reflexively reaching out to break his fall, landed squarely on Elias's outstretched leg, knocking the boy off balance. Elias, startled, cried out, more in surprise than pain, as his precious sketchbook, lying open beside him, skittered across the pavement, its carefully drawn pages fluttering wildly. The small tin of charcoals rolled, spilling its contents. He scrambled to retrieve them, his heart sinking at the thought of damage to his work, to his precious tools. Julian, jolted back to reality, looked down, his face a mask of annoyance that quickly morphed into something akin to embarrassment. "Watch where you're going, kid," he snapped, his voice rough with irritation and underlying stress. Then he saw the scattered drawings, the smudged charcoal, and the boy's distraught face. "Oh, right, sorry." He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a crisp $100 bill, his standard recompense for any minor inconvenience or unintended collision. "Here, For your supplies." He offered it with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to making problems disappear with a flash of cash. Elias looked up, his large, intelligent eyes, usually wary and guarded, now filled with a mix of surprise and a flicker of something Julian couldn't quite decipher. He ignored the money, his gaze fixed on Julian's face, on the profound, almost tangible grief etched around his eyes, the subtle tremor in his hand. Elias, a connoisseur of human emotion, immediately recognized the depth of suffering there. He had seen that look before, on the faces of parents entering and leaving the hospital. He recognized Julian now. He was the man from the limousine, the one whose daughter was in room 307. Elias had studied the building plans, the floor numbers, the patterns of the hospital. He knew. "It's okay, sir," Elias said, his voice quiet, surprisingly clear and steady, devoid of any resentment or desire for compensation. He began to gather his charcoals, his movements deliberate. "No harm done." Julian, taken aback by the boy's unexpected composure and his refusal of the money, found himself staring. Most street kids would snatch the bill without a second glance. This one just looked at him with an unnerving intensity, as if he could see right through Julian's expensive suit, into the raw, bleeding wound of his despair. You frequent this area?" Julian asked, a non sequitur born of his unease. He felt a strange compulsion to understand this unusual child. Elias nodded, stacking his charcoal sticks neatly. "Sometimes I draw here." He gestured to the cathedral drawing. "It's good for light." Julian glanced at the drawing, a genuine masterpiece rendered on cheap paper. He wasn't an art connoisseur, but he recognized talent. "That's impressive. Very impressive." He felt a fleeting distraction, a momentary reprieve from his internal torment. "You must have a good eye." Elias, however, was not interested in praise for his art. His gaze remained fixed on Julian's anguished face. He had heard snippets of conversations from nurses, seen the doctors shaking their heads. He knew the name, Amelia Thorne. He knew the symptoms: progressive motor degeneration, unexplained nerve damage, loss of function. He had read about similar cases in his dusty medical textbooks, obscure syndromes with complex, often misunderstood pathways. He had spent hours connecting the dots, observing Amelia through her hospital window, a tiny, pale figure, her legs limp. His wild theory, so audacious, so unorthodox, so seemingly impossible for a boy his age, suddenly felt like a burning truth he could no longer keep to himself. He saw Julian's raw, unadulterated pain, and a fierce, unbidden desire to help surge through him. A powerful empathy that transcended their vast social chasm. This wasn't about money or fame. It was about fixing what was broken, about easing suffering. Julian sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, his mind drifting back to the crushing news he'd just received. "It doesn't matter how good your eye is, kid," he muttered, his voice cracking slightly with the depth of his unspoken grief. Some things you just can't fix, no matter what." He thought of Amelia, of her fragile smile, of the life slipping away from her. The despair was a cold, suffocating blanket. Elias watched him, his young mind processing the nuances of Julian's despair, the millionaire's helplessness. He understood that Julian was talking about Amelia, the unspoken desperation, the raw primal pain of a parent. This was the moment. This was the flicker of opportunity, a tiny, impossibly thin window through which he might offer his truth. All the hours spent poring over medical texts, observing, connecting, theorizing, it coalesced into a single, audacious declaration. He swallowed, the words catching in his throat, but the urgency of the moment pushed them out. "Sir," Elias said, his voice cutting through the ambient city noise, quieter than Julian's own agitated breathing, yet resonating with an unexpected clarity and conviction that instantly arrested Julian's attention. "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." Julian Thorne, who had been on the verge of turning away, his mind already returning to the oppressive weight of his corporate empire and his private anguish, suddenly froze. His body, rigid with shock, ceased all movement. The sounds of the city seemed to recede, fading into a dull roar. He slowly, deliberately turned back, his gaze narrowing, fixing on the small boy before him. His initial reaction was a surge of pure, visceral rage. How dare this street urchin, this beggar boy, mock his deepest pain? How dare he exploit a father's despair with such a cruel, impossible lie? It was an insult, a grotesque parody of his suffering, a calculated attempt to extract money from his vulnerability. He saw a scam, a trick, a manipulation. But then, as his eyes met Elias's, the rage faltered. There was no guile in those eyes, no cunning, no avarice, only a steady, unsettling certainty, a profound, almost spiritual conviction. Elias stood perfectly still, his small frame radiating an unwavering sincerity, his expression devoid of anything but earnest intent. It wasn't the look of a con artist. It was the look of someone who genuinely believed in his own impossible claim. Julian's highly analytical mind, despite its initial furious rejection, began to churn. A beggar boy? Making such a claim? Ridiculous. Utterly absurd. Yet, beneath the layers of cynicism and rational dismissal, a tiny, almost imperceptible spark ignited. A desperate, irrational, utterly illogical flicker of hope. He had tried everything. He had exhausted every known medical pathway, every cutting-edge treatment, every conventional solution. What did he have left to lose? The thought was terrifying, blasphemous to his scientific, empirical worldview. Yet it resonated with the raw, primal need of a father desperate for his child. He had been drowning in despair, and now a small, grimy hand, belonging to a boy he had just knocked over, was offering him a lifeline, however improbable. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken questions, with the clash of two vastly different worlds. Julian, the millionaire titan, accustomed to wielding absolute power, found himself utterly disarmed by the audacious declaration of a street child. His heart, battered and bruised by years of medical disappointments, pulsed with a desperate, unfamiliar rhythm. He looked at the boy again, at the charcoal smudges on his cheek, at the profound intelligence in his eyes. Elias's statement was a challenge, an impossibility, yet it resonated with an unyielding certainty that Julian could not, would not, ignore. His journey into the depths of despair had brought him to this unexpected precipice, facing an improbable profit in the most unlikely of places. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that after this exchange, he could not simply walk away and return to his old life. The words had been spoken, the claim made. His daughter's future, his own sanity, demanded that he investigate this impossible claim. The point of no return had been crossed. The quiet before the storm had just been irrevocably shattered by a single, audacious declaration from a boy who held a secret, unconventional truth. Julian Thorne stood transfixed, the chaotic symphony of the city fading into a dull hum against the sudden shocking clarity of Elias's words. The sheer audacity of the claim, delivered by a child no older than his own daughter, should have been an immediate dismissal, a cause for outright fury, a moment for his hardened cynicism to assert itself. Yet, something in Elias's steady, unwavering gaze, a profound conviction utterly devoid of guile or a street performer's theatricality, held him captive, locking him in a bizarre, almost surreal confrontation. The initial surge of pure, visceral rage that had coursed through Julian's veins, the protective instinct of a father sensing a predatory scam preying on his deepest wound, wavered, then faltered, replaced by a terrifying, almost blasphemous flicker of a desperate, irrational hope. He had exhausted every logical, scientific, and financial avenue known to man. Every avenue, that is, except the illogical, the impossible. What if there truly was an illogical one? Liam, Julian's head of security, a man whose imposing presence usually radiated silent competence and watchful vigilance, had discreetly approached the scene, alerted by the sudden, unprecedented halt of the armored limousine and Julian's unusual, spontaneous departure from protocol. He stood a few feet back, a silent, unmoving sentinel, observing with a hawk's keen, analytical eye, his expression a carefully neutral mask. He had seen every trick, every hustle, every calculated deception on these labyrinthine streets. A street kid making audacious medical claims to a billionaire whose child was dying? Liam's internal alarms blared with unprecedented ferocity. This was a classic mark and target scenario, he concluded, albeit an unusually bold and seemingly impromptu one. His hand hovered near his concealed weapon, ready for any sudden movement. Julian finally broke the oppressive silence, his voice a low, dangerous growl, barely controlled, vibrating with a raw mixture of suppressed fury and burgeoning, terrifying curiosity. "Who are you, kid? And what exactly do you mean? You can make her walk again." His words were laced with a lethal blend of profound skepticism and a nascent, terrifying desperation, each syllable heavy with the weight of Amelia's suffering. Elias didn't flinch. He looked directly into Julian's piercing, emerald-green eyes, unblinking, his own gaze clear and steady, devoid of the usual flicker of fear or subservience seen in street children. "My name is Elias, and I mean what I said, sir. I know about Amelia. I've seen her from the hospital, and I've read about cases like hers. I think I know why she can't walk, and what might help." His voice was quiet, almost a whisper against the roaring backdrop of the city, but it was imbued with an unsettling certainty, a profound conviction that commanded Julian's attention, demanding to be heard. He knew instinctively that this was his one singular chance, a fleeting window of opportunity to be taken seriously. He had to be precise, compelling, utterly undeniable. Julian scoffed, a short, bitter, almost broken sound that was more a gasp of disbelief than a laugh. "You've read about cases? From where? A comic book? A pamphlet from a quack healer?" He ran a frustrated hand through his impeccably styled hair. "Do you have any idea what you're saying? My daughter has been seen by the best neurologists, the finest orthopedists, the most lauded specialists in the entire world. They've run every test imaginable, exhausted every diagnostic tool known to man. There's no definitive diagnosis, no known cure. And you, a street kid, covered in charcoal dust, think you know better. You think you hold a secret that countless Nobel laureates have missed?" His voice rose slightly, verging on raw indignation, his composure cracking under the unbearable pressure. Liam shifted his stance, his hand moving subtly, ready to intervene, to physically remove the boy if necessary, to protect his principal from what he perceived as a cruel and dangerous manipulation. Elias, remarkably, remained calm, his small frame radiating an unshakable inner peace. He reached slowly for his tattered sketchbook, its cover worn smooth from countless hours of handling, its pages smudged with charcoal but carefully preserved, almost revered. He quickly flipped to a specific section filled with a series of startlingly detailed anatomical drawings, not just of superficial bones and muscles, but of intricate, labyrinthine nerve pathways, deep tissue structures and vascular networks, all rendered with an astonishing, almost photographic accuracy that seemed impossible for an untrained hand. "They say it's neurological, sir. A generalized neuropathy, perhaps. But I think it's a localized compression. A subtle one, not easily detected by standard MRI or nerve conduction scans. Maybe in the lumbar spine or the sacral plexus. It's affecting the signal to her motor neurons, causing progressive atrophy in the lower limbs, but not affecting the brain itself." He pointed with a charcoal-smudged finger to a complex diagram of the spinal cord and its myriad nerve branches, his voice gaining a quiet academic authority. "The symptoms match. The gradual, insidious onset, the curious lack of inflammation markers in her blood, the preserved cognitive function. It's a very rare variant, sir, but I read about it in an old medical journal. The Thorne syndrome, they called it, named after the very first family it affected generations ago. But that knowledge was lost to modern medicine, dismissed as anecdotal, because it wasn't widely published or scientifically validated at the time. The journal said it responded to very specific deep tissue manipulation and a particular blend of herbal anti-inflammatories applied topically." Julian's eyes, which had been narrowed in skeptical scrutiny, widened imperceptibly, his initial disbelief replaced by a dawning, chilling, almost fantastical realization. "Thorne syndrome," he whispered, his voice suddenly hoarse, barely audible above the city's roar. The name echoed in the deepest, most arcane recesses of his family history. A distant, almost mythological tale of an ancestor afflicted by a mysterious, debilitating illness generations ago. A story long dismissed as antiquated folklore by his rigorously scientific and empirically minded family. No modern doctor, no geneticist, no renowned specialist had ever once mentioned it. How could this boy, this street urchin, possibly know such an obscure, forgotten detail? It defied all logic, all reason. Liam, who had remained a silent, watchful sentinel, took an involuntary step closer, his professional curiosity now piqued beyond mere security concerns. He observed Elias more carefully, noticing not just the intensity in his young eyes, but the startling precision of his vocabulary, the almost flawless articulation of complex medical concepts. This was no ordinary con artist, no simple grifter. His earlier intel on Elias had revealed nothing but a quiet, resourceful street kid with an unusual knack for drawing. But anatomical diagrams of this caliber? Obscure, forgotten medical conditions? This was far, far beyond the scope of a simple street trick. He felt a shiver of unease, a strange sense of something extraordinary unfolding. "How do you know this?" Julian demanded again, his voice now entirely devoid of anger, replaced by a desperate, almost pleading urgency that surprised even himself. "How could you possibly know about Thorne syndrome? It's not even a recognized medical term anymore. It's a family legend." Elias hesitated, a flicker of vulnerability, a rare glimpse into his carefully guarded inner world, appearing in his eyes. He wouldn't, reveal his clandestine observations from the hospital window, the hours spent watching Amelia, or his nightly solitary forays into discarded medical texts under the pale glow of a street lamp. That would sound insane, the rambling of a deluded child. He had to be careful, yet utterly convincing. I frequent the public library, sir, and sometimes people discard books, medical books, near the university dumpsters. I found an old journal. Very, very old. It described cases. And I see Amelia in the hospital, sir, from outside. I watch the way she sits in her wheelchair, the way she tries to move her legs, the quiet frustration in her eyes, sir. She's not just a medical chart. She's a person who wants to walk. His voice softened, revealing a profound, almost spiritual empathy that cut through Julian's hardened, guarded exterior like a surgeon's scalpel. He wasn't just reciting facts. He was connecting on a deeply human, emotional level, touching the raw nerve of Julian's despair. Julian felt a powerful, almost physical jolt, as if struck by an invisible force. She's not just a medical chart. The words resonated deeply within him, echoing his own unspoken frustrations, his own profound alienation from the cold, clinical, detached approach of the eminent doctors. They had seen Amelia as a collection of symptoms, a baffling medical mystery, a fascinating case study, but rarely, he realized, as a suffering, struggling child. "Liam," Julian said, his voice barely above a whisper, without taking his eyes off Elias, as if afraid the boy would vanish if he looked away. "Verify this. The Thorne syndrome. Any mention, anywhere, no matter how obscure, how dismissed. And get me everything you can on this boy's background. Everything. Every book he's ever checked out, every discarded journal, every detail of his life. And be discreet." His voice was low, authoritative, and utterly serious, carrying the full weight of his immense power. Liam, a man who rarely showed emotion, understood the monumental shift. He simply nodded, his face grim, already pulling out his secure comms device, his fingers flying across the keypad, initiating a rapid, top-level investigation. This spontaneous, almost desperate unveiling of Elias's peculiar, self-taught medical genius was witnessed only by Julian and Liam. It was Elias's desperate, last-ditch effort to be heard, born not of ambition or greed, but of a genuine, overwhelming desire to help, a deep, innate empathy that outweighed his own precarious situation and the inherent risks of such an audacious claim. He didn't boast, didn't demand. He simply presented his case, offering the only currency he truly possessed: knowledge, intuition, and a profound, compassionate understanding of suffering. As Julian and Liam prepared to leave, the sleek black doors of a luxury sedan pulled up to the curb, disgorging its occupant. Out stepped Dr. Eleanor Vance, Amelia's lead neurologist, a woman of impeccable credentials, a towering intellect, and a formidable reputation within the medical community. Her tailored charcoal suit, meticulously pressed, exuded an air of unwavering scientific certainty and controlled authority. She was brilliant, dedicated to her patients, but also fiercely conventional, intolerant of anything outside the established medical paradigm. She was, in Julian's internal categorization, a person who misunderstood Type B, a professional whose immense pride, unwavering adherence to protocol, and entrenched beliefs blinded her to unconventional possibilities. She saw medicine as a precise empirical science, a logical puzzle to be solved, not an intuitive art of human connection or holistic understanding. She had just finished an urgent, unannounced follow-up with Amelia, and her aristocratic face, usually composed, was etched with renewed concern, a hint of frustration. She spotted Julian on the sidewalk, deep in what appeared to be an intensely serious conversation with a street urchin. Her brow furrowed with immediate, undisguised disapproval, her eyes narrowing to suspicious slits. She had been increasingly wary of Julian's desperate, unfettered search for alternative treatments, seeing it not as love, but as a dangerous distraction, a foolish susceptibility to charlatans and false hopes. "Mr. Thorne," Dr. Vance called out, her voice sharp, cutting through the ambient city noise like a surgical knife. She walked briskly towards them, her expensive heels clicking precisely on the pavement, each step radiating confident disdain. Her gaze swept over Elias, taking in his ragged appearance, his charcoal-smudged hands still clutching the battered sketchbook, with undisguised contempt. "What, precisely, is going on here?" "I've just left Amelia. Her condition, it's deteriorating quite rapidly, as I explained earlier. This is absolutely not the time for distractions." Her gaze returned to Elias, her eyes cold, dismissive. "Are you actually considering something this ridiculous? Engaging with street peddlers for highly complex medical advice? Mr. Thorne, this is incredibly irresponsible, shockingly reckless. You are playing with your daughter's life, jeopardizing her already fragile condition." Her voice was laced with open disdain, a clear public challenge to Julian's judgment, a thinly veiled accusation of gullibility. She saw Elias as not just a nuisance, but a direct threat, not to her medical authority directly, but to her patient's well-being through Julian's desperate vulnerability. She even subtly moved to place herself physically between Julian and Elias, as if to shield Julian from the perceived danger of the boy's influence, a silent assertion of her professional guardianship. Julian's jaw tightened, a muscle clenching beneath his ear. He respected Dr. Vance's medical acumen, her intellect, but her condescension, her rigid adherence to convention, and her public dismissal of a desperate father's last, irrational hope infuriated him. "Dr. Vance," he replied, his voice dangerously low, a calm before a storm. "This is a private conversation, and I assure you, I am doing everything within my power to help my daughter. My resources are limitless, and I will explore every single possibility." "Everything within your power means following established, peer-reviewed medical protocols, Mr. Thorne, not listening to absurd, unscientific claims from individuals with no medical training, no credentials, no understanding of modern pathophysiology." She gestured dismissively at Elias, as if he were an irritating insect. "This is dangerous, Mr. Thorne. Any so-called alternative treatment from someone like this could cause irreversible neurological harm to Amelia. You must not risk her health further with such reckless, desperate gambles. I strongly advise against any unorthodox intervention. You are being naive, desperately so, blinded by your understandable grief." Her tone was a thinly veiled accusation, a public shaming, meant to exert professional pressure and isolate Julian. She saw herself as protecting Amelia, but her words were dripping with professional arrogance, a deep-seated prejudice against anything outside her rigid scientific worldview, and a profound inability to acknowledge the possibility of knowledge existing beyond her own privileged sphere. Elias, though accustomed to scorn and dismissal from the privileged, felt a deep pang of injustice, a quiet burning in his gut. He wasn't a charlatan. He genuinely wanted to help. He had seen the truth, felt the connection. But he remained silent, observing the dynamics of power and pride unfolding before him, knowing this was not his battle to fight directly. Not yet. He recognized her type. Highly educated, outwardly powerful, dismissive of anything she didn't understand, arrogant in her certainty. Julian's face remained impassive, betraying nothing of the internal maelstrom, but a cold, steely resolve hardened his features. Dr. Vance's open scorn, her public dismissal of a desperate father's last irrational hope, had, ironically, solidified his decision. He had been on the very verge of simply dismissing Elias, perhaps even offering a large sum of money to be rid of the unsettling encounter. But Dr. Vance's blinding arrogance had tipped the scales decisively. He would, at the very least, explore this. He owed it to Amelia. And perhaps, just perhaps, this ragged, brilliant boy held a truth that all the world's eminent doctors, in their sanitized labs and ivory towers, had somehow, tragically, missed. He had seen the proof in Elias's clear, earnest eyes, in his calm, intelligent delivery, and in the chilling, uncanny resonance of the Thorne syndrome name, a name only he, Julian, and now Elias knew. He would not be swayed by professional arrogance or societal prejudice. The unveiling was complete. Elias possessed an unacknowledged, almost miraculous gift, a hidden legend, and the formidable forces of conventional wisdom and skepticism were now firmly arrayed against him. The stage was set, not just for a medical miracle, but for the ultimate test of human perception and faith. Julian Thorne's world had fractured into two stark, opposing realities. On one side, the formidable, unyielding wall of conventional medicine, embodied by Dr. Eleanor Vance, demanded adherence to established science, dismissing anything beyond its empirical reach as charlatanry. On the other stood Elias, a 12-year-old boy from the streets, whose impossible claim and uncanny knowledge had ignited a desperate, irrational spark of hope in Julian's weary heart. The very name, Thorne syndrome, whispered by Elias, had resonated with a forgotten family legend, a chilling and compelling detail that no other specialist, despite all their research and technology, had ever unearthed. The pressure on Julian was immense, a crushing weight that threatened to buckle him. His most trusted advisors, his board members, even some close family friends, subtly questioned his judgment. "Are you truly going to put Amelia's life in the hands of a street kid, Julian?" The unspoken question hung heavy in every hushed conversation, every worried glance. He felt the judgment, the unspoken accusations of desperation turning into foolishness. Yet, he could not shake Elias's profound conviction, nor the chilling accuracy of his obscure medical insights. He had seen the raw, undeniable intelligence in the boy's eyes, a clarity that cut through the scientific jargon and clinical detachment of the experts. For Amelia, he would risk everything. Julian needed more than just a gut feeling. He needed validation, a controlled environment where Elias could present his theory to an audience that, while skeptical, was also open-minded enough to consider the unconventional, away from Dr. Vance's immediate dismissive influence. He instructed Liam to arrange a discreet, high-stakes consultation. This was not merely a meeting. It was to be an inquisition, a trial by fire for Elias. The arena chosen for this ultimate test was the private research laboratory wing of Thorne Medical Innovations, Julian's own state-of-the-art medical research facility. It was a gleaming, sterile expanse of chrome, glass, and cutting-edge machinery, a place where groundbreaking research typically occurred, overseen by teams of highly credentialed scientists. This was the sanctum of modern medicine, a bastion of empirical data and peer-reviewed studies. It was, in essence, the very antithesis of Elias's alleyway existence, a stark, symbolic battleground where the wisdom of the streets would confront the might of scientific orthodoxy. Julian assembled a small, hand-picked panel of independent medical professionals. Two highly respected but open-minded neurologists from outside his usual network, and a seasoned physical therapist known for her holistic approach. He briefed them meticulously, omitting Elias's background, simply presenting him as an individual with an unconventional theory regarding Amelia's condition. He wanted an unbiased assessment, a pure evaluation of the idea, not the source. Liam was present, a silent, watchful shadow, ready to intervene if needed. Amelia, her small frame looking even more fragile than usual in her customized wheelchair, was also there, positioned quietly to one side of the room, her eyes wide, sensing the unspoken tension. The atmosphere in the gleaming conference room was electric, crackling with skepticism and unspoken expectation. Elias, dressed in a borrowed, ill-fitting but clean suit that Julian's staff had quietly procured for him, looked impossibly small in the cavernous room. His hands, usually so confident with charcoal, trembled slightly as he clutched his battered sketchbook. He felt the weight of every judging gaze, every unspoken doubt. He was alone, utterly and completely isolated in this crucible of scientific scrutiny. As the presentation began, Dr. Vance, having somehow caught wind of the secret meeting through her vast professional network and fueled by righteous indignation, burst into the room. Her face was flushed with anger, her eyes blazing. "Mr. Thorne, how dare you, holding a clandestine meeting behind my back, and with him?" She pointed a trembling finger at Elias. Her presence was a calculated public challenge, designed to undermine Elias's credibility and Julian's judgment. "Dr. Vance, this is a private consultation," Julian stated, his voice calm but with an underlying steel that brooked no argument. "You are not authorized to be here. I am Amelia's lead physician, and I am authorized to protect her from reckless charlatanism," she retorted, her voice echoing with professional outrage. She turned her scathing gaze on Elias. "Young man, you claim to have a cure, after years of the world's leading experts failing? This is not just delusional. It's dangerous. You are preying on a desperate father's grief." She scoffed, her disdain palpable. "Do you even know what a neuron is beyond what you've read in some discarded, outdated textbook? Have you performed a single peer-reviewed study? Do you have a medical license? A degree? Anything?" Her words were designed to humiliate, to expose, to shatter any illusion Elias might possess. Elias flinched under the onslaught, his face paling, but he straightened his small shoulders. He looked at Amelia, then back at Julian, whose eyes were filled with a desperate, silent plea. This was it, the ultimate test. He was not just fighting for Amelia. He was fighting for the validity of intuition, of unconventional knowledge, of the possibility that truth could emerge from the most unlikely places. "I don't have a degree, Dr. Vance," Elias said, his voice surprisingly steady, though still quiet. "And I haven't done any peer-reviewed studies, but I have observed, and I have read, and I believe I've connected something that has been missed." He opened his sketchbook, displaying a meticulously drawn cross-section of the lumbar spine, complete with intricate nerve roots. He then projected an image of Amelia's most recent MRI onto the large screen, obtained by Liam through discrete channels. "Look closely at the L4-L5 region and the S1 nerve root," Elias began, his voice gaining confidence as he focused on the medical details, slipping into the academic cadence he'd absorbed from his stolen textbooks. "The conventional scans show no significant compression, but this is where the Thorne syndrome is unique. It's not a direct, obvious compression. It's a subtle, almost imperceptible microadhesion, a thickening of the fascia around the nerve sheath, exacerbated by a specific rotational microtrauma from early childhood. It's too fine for standard imaging, too diffuse for a typical nerve block to detect. It causes a gradual, progressive constriction, slowly starving the motor neurons of proper signal transmission, leading to what appears to be a generalized neuropathy." He pointed to specific points on his drawing, then to faint, almost invisible shadows on Amelia's MRI. The historical accounts in the old journal mentioned that the initial trauma was often associated with a fall or a specific strain during a critical developmental phase, leading to a long-term insidious progression. Modern medicine, focusing on gross pathology and inflammatory markers, has missed this subtle, mechanical cause. The two independent neurologists leaned forward, their expressions shifting from polite skepticism to cautious intrigue. Elias was using precise medical terminology, demonstrating an understanding of neuroanatomy that was impossible for an uneducated child. Dr. Vance, however, scoffed louder. "Microadhesion? Fascia thickening? Preposterous. Without a discernible inflammatory response or clear mechanical impingement, it's a fantasy. And Thorne syndrome is a folktale, not a medical condition. You're pulling this from thin air." "But what if it's not inflammation?" Elias countered, his eyes burning with conviction. "What if it's a structural anomaly that mimics inflammation? A slow, mechanical strangulation of the nerve, not a chemical one. He then presented his proposed treatment, a series of very specific, highly localized deep tissue manipulations designed to gently release the microadhesions, combined with a topical application of a unique herbal salve, made from a blend of rare plants he'd studied in his old texts, known for their restorative and anti-fibrotic properties. Dr. Vance erupted. "Herbal salves? Are you insane? This is a child we're talking about, Mr. Thorne. This is a medical facility, not a back-alley apothecary. This is not just irresponsible, it's malpractice. You are putting your daughter at extreme, irreversible risk." Her voice rose to a near scream, echoing through the sterile room. She turned to the other neurologists. "Are you truly going to stand by and allow this experiment on a child with a severe neurological condition? This is unethical, unscientific, and potentially catastrophic." The other neurologists, though intrigued, remained cautious. "It's highly unorthodox," one conceded, "and without any peer-reviewed data, it's a huge leap of faith." Julian, torn between the overwhelming weight of conventional wisdom and the profound illogical pull of Elias's conviction, felt the walls closing in. The clock was ticking. Amelia's condition was worsening. He had to make a choice. A profound silence fell over the room, broken only by the soft hum of the medical equipment. All eyes, including Amelia's, were on Julian. This was the moment, the ultimate test. Elias looked at Julian, his face pale but resolute. "Sir," he said, his voice barely a whisper, yet it reached every corner of the room. "I know this sounds impossible, but I believe this is Amelia's chance. This is her last hope. I understand the risks, but I promise you, I will be gentle, and I will not harm her." His eyes, direct and earnest, held a desperate plea, a raw, innocent faith that Julian found impossible to dismiss. Julian looked at Amelia, her small, innocent face looking up at him. Her eyes filled with a quiet, heartbreaking trust. He remembered the feeling of helplessness, the years of despair. He had exhausted every known path. Now, an unknown path had opened, however improbable. He thought of the little boy helping the old woman, refusing money, an act of pure, unsolicited kindness. He thought of the Thorne syndrome name, a buried secret that Elias of all people had unearthed. A gamble? Yes, but one he felt compelled to take. The gauntlet had been thrown. The decision had to be made, and he would make it alone. The air in the state-of-the-art laboratory crackled with an almost unbearable tension, thick and suffocating like a storm about to break. Julian Thorne stood at the very epicenter of this maelstrom, caught precariously between the crushing weight of conventional medical authority, embodied by the furious, unyielding presence of Dr. Eleanor Vance, and the fragile, audacious, almost unbelievable hope offered by a 12-year-old street boy. Dr. Vance, her face contorted with professional indignation and thinly veiled rage, her jaw tight, glared first at Elias, then at Julian, her very posture radiating a furious certainty that this entire undertaking was not merely a mistake, but a catastrophic, unforgivable act of reckless endangerment. The two independent neurologists, brought in by Julian specifically for an unbiased assessment, exchanged uneasy, wary glances, their professional skepticism palpable despite their earlier fleeting intrigue. Liam, ever vigilant, stood silently by Julian's side, a granite statue of unwavering loyalty, his hand resting subtly on the hidden comms device, his face an impenetrable mask, ready for any command. And in the very center of it all, Amelia, her small, pale face a beacon of innocent trust and quiet fragility, sat in her customized wheelchair, looking from her father to Elias, sensing the immense gravity of the moment, yet blissfully unaware of the full, terrifying stakes. Julian had to make the decision. The silence in the room stretched, punctuated only by the soft, rhythmic hum of sophisticated medical equipment, a stark contrast to the tumultuous hammering of Julian's own heart. He looked at Elias, at the boy's unwavering, intense eyes, which held no hint of doubt or deception, only a profound, almost spiritual certainty. Then he looked at Amelia, his beloved daughter, whose future, whose very ability to experience life fully, hung in the agonizing balance. Every fiber of his logical, scientifically trained mind screamed against this. It was madness, utter and complete. A reckless, irresponsible gamble with the most precious thing in his life. But his heart, raw and bleeding from years of failed treatments, from the crushing despair of countless specialists offering nothing but grim prognoses, whispered a different truth. What if? What if this impossible child, this improbable prophet from the streets, held the key that all the world's eminent medical minds had somehow overlooked? He remembered Elias's quiet, compelling sincerity, the uncanny accuracy of his Thorne syndrome knowledge, a detail so obscure it felt like a direct whisper from the past. He remembered the pure, unsolicited kindness Elias had shown to an old woman on the street, an act devoid of any expectation of reward. It was a leap of faith, a terrifying plunge into the deep, unknown abyss. But for Amelia, he would leap. "All right," Julian said, his voice cutting through the suffocating silence. Surprisingly steady, remarkably devoid of the turmoil raging within him. It was the voice of a man who had made his decision, come what may. "Elias, proceed." A collective gasp rippled through the small, stunned group. Dr. Vance looked as if she might physically collapse, her face draining of all color, turning a sickly pale. Her carefully coiffed hair seemed to bristle. "Mr. Thorne, you cannot be serious. This is reckless beyond belief. You are risking permanent, irreversible damage to your daughter. This is a medical catastrophe waiting to happen." Her voice, though initially controlled, rose to a desperate, shrill pitch, verging on a scream. Julian turned to her, his gaze cold, resolute, radiating an almost frightening calm. "Dr. Vance, with all due respect, your methods, and the methods of every other renowned specialist we've consulted, have failed. We are out of conventional options. Amelia is my daughter, and I will exhaust every single possibility, no matter how unconventional, no matter how remote. Liam, ensure Dr. Vance is escorted out immediately if she cannot maintain professional decorum." Liam, with a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, moved a single, purposeful step closer to Dr. Vance, his mere presence a silent, undeniable threat of removal. Dr. Vance, seeing the unyielding, steely resolve in Julian's eyes, bit back another furious protest, her lips compressing into a thin, angry line. Her face was a thundercloud of impotent rage, of professional humiliation, and of a deep-seated belief that she was witnessing a grave error. She would stay, but only to witness, with morbid certainty, what she believed would be an inevitable, tragic disaster, ready to lay blame where she felt it belonged. Elias, seemingly impervious to the storm of adult emotion raging around him, approached Amelia's wheelchair with a quiet, focused determination. His movements were precise, deliberate, almost ritualistic. He knelt before her, gently taking her small, limp legs into his hands, his touch remarkably tender. Amelia looked at him, her large, innocent eyes widening slightly, a flicker of curiosity mingled with a childlike apprehension. "What are you going to do?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, a fragile thread in the tense silence. "I'm going to help your legs remember how to dance," Elias replied, a soft, encouraging smile gracing his face, the first genuine, unburdened smile Julian had seen from him since their fateful meeting. His touch was incredibly gentle, almost reverent, as if he were handling the most fragile and precious of treasures. His hands, though small, exuded an inexplicable warmth. He uncorked a small, dark glass bottle, producing a thick, earthy-smelling herbal salve he had painstakingly prepared from the rare plants mentioned in the old forgotten journal, their existence confirmed and sourced discreetly by Liam. He began to apply it to specific points along Amelia's lower back, her sacrum, and gently down her legs, massaging it into the skin with slow, deliberate circular motions. His fingers, though young, possessed an uncanny strength and sensitivity, moving with an intuitive grace. He found subtle knots and adhesions, minute areas of constriction that had eluded even the most sophisticated diagnostic equipment. He worked in profound silence, his brow furrowed in intense concentration, his breathing steady, almost meditative, as if entering a deep, personal trance. The minutes stretched into an eternity, each tick of the wall clock amplifying the unbearable anticipation. The sterile air of the laboratory grew heavy with the earthy, unfamiliar scent of the salve, a strange counterpoint to the clinical cleanliness. Dr. Vance stood rigid, arms crossed tightly across her chest, a sneer plastered on her face, her eyes fixed on Amelia's motionless legs, waiting, almost eagerly, for the inevitable failure, ready to unleash a torrent of "I told you so's" that would surely follow. The two independent neurologists watched with a mixture of professional curiosity and profound doubt, their medical training screaming for a tangible, visible response, for scientific validation that was not forthcoming. Julian stood directly behind Elias, his hands clenched into tight fists at his sides, his heart pounding a frantic, irregular rhythm against his ribs, a desperate drumbeat of hope and fear. He studied Elias's face, searching for any fleeting sign of doubt, any flicker of uncertainty, but found none. Only pure, focused determination, a quiet, almost spiritual conviction that resonated with an ancient, forgotten wisdom. Then Dr. Vance scoffed, a loud, derisive sound that shattered the delicate tension, echoing cruelly in the silent room. "This is ludicrous. There's no scientific basis for this. It's nothing but an elaborate placebo. She's not reacting. Her muscles are completely flaccid, still unresponsive." Her voice was sharp, triumphant, laced with an almost malicious glee, her eyes flashing. The other neurologists shifted uncomfortably, their expressions betraying their silent agreement. Julian's heart sank, a cold, suffocating wave of despair washing over him, threatening to engulf him entirely. He had placed all his desperate, agonizing hope on this impossible gamble, this absurd roll of the dice, and it seemed he had failed Amelia once again, condemning her to a life of immobility. The breath-holding moment had arrived, a crushing wave of anticipated defeat, a silent confirmation of his foolishness. Elias, however, did not acknowledge Dr. Vance, did not even seem to register her presence. His eyes remained fixed on Amelia's legs, his brow furrowed deeper in unwavering concentration. He applied a final, precise pressure point just above Amelia's left ankle, holding it for a long, agonizing moment, his thumb pressed with an almost unbearable stillness. Then, imperceptibly at first, a twitch. A tiny, almost unnoticeable flicker of movement in Amelia's left big toe. It was so small, so fleeting, that only Elias, with his intense, laser-like focus, and Julian, whose eyes were riveted on his daughter's every infinitesimal movement, seemed to catch it. It was like a single spark igniting in the vast darkness. Julian's breath hitched, caught in his throat. His entire body tensed. "Amelia?" he whispered, his voice choked with disbelief, a fragile whisper of hope. Elias smiled, a small, knowing upturn of his lips, a flicker of quiet triumph. "Again, Amelia, just try to wiggle your toes. You can do it." His voice was soft, encouraging, filled with an unwavering belief. A moment of profound, sacred silence stretched, holding its breath. Then, Amelia's right big toe, then her left, then her right again, moved. More distinctly this time. A ripple of actual, voluntary movement, a tentative awakening. A new energy seemed to flow through her fragile limbs, chasing away the lethargy. The two independent neurologists gasped simultaneously, their eyes widening in profound shock, then in dawning amazement. Dr. Vance's triumphant sneer vanished entirely, replaced by a look of utter, jaw-dropping stupefaction, her mouth hanging slightly ajar. Her eyes darted frantically from Amelia's twitching toes to Elias, then back again, her highly analytical, meticulously trained mind struggling, failing, to reconcile what she was witnessing with every shred of her scientific training, every preconceived notion. Her world, once so ordered, was violently shaking. Elias then gently, slowly, guided Amelia's small feet to the cool, sterile floor, his hands still providing subtle support. "Now, Amelia, try to stand up. Just a little. You can do it." His voice was a calm anchor in the swirling vortex of disbelief. Amelia, her face a mixture of wonder and disbelief, placed her small feet on the cool, sterile floor. The sensation, alien and exhilarating, sent a jolt through her. She looked at Elias, her eyes shining with a burgeoning, almost blinding hope. Then at Julian, her father, his face etched with unspeakable emotion. with Elias's gentle, steadying hands on her tiny waist, providing just enough support, and Julian's encouraging, tear-filled gaze, radiating boundless love, Amelia pushed. Slowly, agonizingly. Her knees wobbled violently, her muscles trembled with effort, but she pushed. She strained, she fought, and then, with a profound, almost silent miracle that defied all medical explanation, she stood. Not perfectly. Not yet. Her legs shook visibly. Her balance was precarious, but she was standing, on her own 2 feet, unassisted by machinery. For the first time in 2 long, agonizing years, a collective, stunned silence fell over the room, absolute and breathless. No one dared to breathe, afraid to shatter the fragile reality. Then, Amelia, her face alight with an unadulterated, blinding happiness that seemed to illuminate the entire room, took a shaky, uncertain step. Then another, and another. She took a few more wobbly, unaided steps towards Julian, her father, her small arms outstretched, her face a radiant masterpiece of pure joy. Julian Thorne, the billionaire titan who rarely showed any emotion, whose face was a mask of calculated composure, felt a raw, primal sob tear through his chest, ripping through years of carefully constructed defenses. He fell to his knees, his expensive suit forgotten, tears streaming down his face, blurring his vision, reaching for his daughter, pulling her into a fierce, protective embrace that spoke of years of unspoken agony, and now, boundless relief. "Amelia, my brave girl, my Amelia," he choked out, his voice thick with overwhelming emotion. The room erupted. The 2 independent neurologists rushed forward, their skepticism utterly shattered, replaced by an awestruck wonder, their faces contorted with a mixture of scientific astonishment and profound human emotion. "Impossible! Utterly impossible!" one of them exclaimed, tears welling in his own eyes, a man of science utterly undone by a miracle. The other was already pulling out his phone, frantically dictating observations, trying to capture every detail of this undeniable, paradigm-shifting moment, desperate to make sense of the impossible. Nurses and lab technicians, drawn by the commotion, peered into the room, their faces reflecting the same profound astonishment, their jaws slack. Dr. Eleanor Vance stood frozen, a statue of disbelief, her body rigid, her mind reeling. Her carefully constructed world of scientific certainty, her impeccable reputation, had just crumbled into dust before her very eyes. The street boy, the charlatan, the uneducated pauper she had so vehemently dismissed and openly scorned, had achieved what she, with all her prestigious degrees, her years of arduous study, her cutting-edge technology, and her vast expertise, had declared utterly, unequivocally impossible. Her face, initially pale with profound shock, now flushed with a potent, agonizing mixture of professional humiliation, an overwhelming sense of profound wonder, and a nascent, terrifying understanding that perhaps, just perhaps her worldview, her rigid adherence to established science, had been tragically, arrogantly, too narrow. Her lips trembled, forming unspoken apologies, unheard praises, her mind struggling to comprehend. The profound public humiliation she had so smugly predicted for Elias had transformed, in a single, breathtaking moment, into a profound, undeniable triumph for him, and an equally profound, shattering professional reckoning for her. Elias, stepping back from the joyous, tearful reunion of father and daughter, watched with a quiet satisfaction, a small, triumphant smile gracing his charcoal-smudged face. His eyes, usually guarded and wary, now shone with an inner light, a profound sense of purpose fulfilled, a quiet vindication. He hadn't just made Amelia walk. He had, in that single, impossible moment, forced a world blinded by convention, by privilege, and by rigid dogma to see beyond its preconceived notions, to acknowledge a truth that defied all logic. The legend, born in the shadows of the streets, had undeniably returned, unveiled not by grand pronouncements, but by an act of pure, impossible hope. A desperate plea answered by an unexpected, undeniable miracle. The immediate aftermath of Amelia's miracle was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Julian Thorne, his face still streaked with tears of unadulterated joy, quickly regained his composure, his formidable executive mind snapping back into action. He orchestrated a rapid, discreet sweep of the laboratory, ensuring no unauthorized personnel had captured the impossible moment. Liam, with chilling efficiency, handled the logistics, ensuring the silence of witnesses with non-disclosure agreements and generous bonuses. Elias, still somewhat dazed by the sudden shift from anonymity to the center of such intense attention, was gently led away, given fresh clothes, and provided with a quiet, comfortable room within the Thorne Medical Innovations facility, a stark contrast to his usual alleyway abode. Dr. Eleanor Vance, however, remained rooted to the spot, a figure of profound, shattering disbelief. The initial shock had given way to a tempest of warring emotions: professional humiliation, scientific cognitive dissonance, and grudgingly, a dawning, terrifying awe. Her mind, a finely tuned instrument of logic and empirical data, struggled desperately to categorize what she had just witnessed. A child, with no formal training, no credentials, had achieved what the collective might of modern medicine had declared impossible. It defied every principle she held sacred. Yet, Amelia Thorne, her patient, had just walked. The undeniable reality stood before her, a living, breathing refutation of her rigid beliefs. Julian approached her, his voice softer now, devoid of the earlier steel. "Dr. Vance," he began, "I understand this is difficult to process." Dr. Vance finally moved, slowly, as if in a trance. She looked at Julian, her eyes hollowed, then at the spot where Amelia had taken her first steps. "Difficult?" she choked out, her voice raw. "Mr. Thorne, this is an anomaly, a statistical impossibility. A miracle." The word tasted bitter on her tongue, an affront to her scientific pride. I publicly dismissed him. I accused him of charlatanism. I was wrong. Horrifically, unforgivably wrong." The admission, torn from her, was a testament to the magnitude of her intellectual defeat. Her arrogance, once so formidable, crumbled under the weight of undeniable proof. She had been so certain, so self-righteous, and the universe had just delivered a resounding public rebuke. "He called it Thorne syndrome," Julian continued, his voice quiet, almost thoughtful. "An obscure, forgotten family legend. No one else, no database, no research, ever brought it up. Only him. He saw something no one else did." Dr. Vance's face paled further. The sheer coincidence, the historical resonance of that name, pushed her even further into the realm of the unbelievable. It wasn't just a random street boy. It was a boy who somehow possessed knowledge that defied logical acquisition. A grudging respect, intertwined with profound bewilderment, began to take root. I must study his methods, this salve, these manipulations. If there is a replicable mechanism, a scientific explanation, it could revolutionize neurology. Her scientific curiosity, momentarily crushed by her ego, now flickered back to life, intense and unyielding. The desire for knowledge, for understanding, superseded her personal humiliation. She was still a scientist, and this was an unparalleled phenomenon. Julian, seeing the genuine shift, the painful dawning of humility in her eyes, nodded slowly. "We will provide you with full access, under strict non-disclosure, of course, and under Elias's guidance. He will be at the forefront of this research." Dr. Vance looked at him, then back towards Amelia, who was now giggling and taking wobbly steps with Julian's help, a picture of joyous, newfound freedom. A single tear tracked a path down Dr. Vance's cheek. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice barely a whisper, I want to apologize. To you, to Amelia, and to Elias. My arrogance, it almost cost your daughter a chance. It almost blinded me to something truly extraordinary. I was a fool. It was a profound act of contrition, a professional humbling of immense proportions. She, the formidable Dr. Vance, had publicly admitted her fallibility, not just to Julian, but implicitly to herself, in the echoing silence of the lab. The immediate downfall of Dr. Vance was not one of professional ruin, but of a shattering of her intellectual pride. She would not be fired or stripped of her license. Instead, she would become a powerful, albeit initially reluctant, advocate for Elias's approach, dedicating her vast resources and scientific rigor to understanding and validating his intuitive knowledge. Her punishment was the humbling realization of her own limitations, and her penance would be to now serve the truth she had once so vehemently denied. She would dedicate herself to this new paradigm, working alongside the very boy she had scorned, ultimately transforming from an antagonist into a person who understood Type B, a powerful supporter. For Elias, a new world, unimaginably vast and full of possibilities, opened before him. Julian had not merely cured Amelia, he had, with that single act of trust, liberated Elias from a life of quiet desperation. The morning after Amelia's miracle, Julian met Elias in a private, sun-drenched lounge within the facility. Elias, now in comfortable, perfectly fitted clothes, looked less like a street kid and more like the brilliant young man he truly was. "Elias," Julian began, his voice warm with gratitude. You saved my daughter. You gave her back her life. And you gave me back my hope. There is no way I can ever repay you, but I can ensure that you never have to worry about anything again. What do you want? Anything. A home, education, anything at all." Elias looked at him, his eyes clear and thoughtful. He didn't ask for money or possessions. He had seen firsthand that wealth alone could not buy happiness or health. "Sir," Elias said, "I want to learn everything. I want to understand how the body works, more than just from old books. I want to learn science, modern medicine, and I want to help people like Amelia, people that others have given up on." Julian smiled, a genuine, relieved smile that transformed his usually stern face. This was not the answer of a beggar, but of a true scholar, a natural healer. "Then that's what we'll do," Julian promised. "Full scholarships, private tutors, access to the best universities, the best labs. You'll have every resource at your disposal, and you will be the driving force behind a new medical research initiative. A foundation, perhaps, dedicated to exploring unconventional approaches, to finding answers where others see only dead ends." Liam, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. "It's already in the works, Elias. Mr. Thorne has already initiated the legal framework. We're calling it the Amelia Thorne Foundation for Integrative Medicine and Unconventional Research. You'll have a seat on the advisory board and directorship over the research programs. Dr. Vance has already agreed to dedicate her time to validating your methods." He paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, "And we've secured a beautiful home for you, fully furnished, with a library, a very large library." Elias felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the sun. It was the warmth of belonging, of purpose, of being seen and valued for who he truly was. He, the forgotten boy from the alley, had found not just a future, but a family of purpose. Later that week, Julian and Elias had a quiet, reflective conversation in Julian's private office, overlooking the sprawling city that had once represented such disparate worlds to them. Amelia, now confidently walking with the aid of a small, discreet brace, was playing happily in an adjoining room, her laughter clear and bright, a constant, joyful backdrop. "It's funny, Elias," Julian mused, gazing out at the city lights. "For years, I believed success was about control, about conquering the impossible through sheer will and resources. I thought I could buy a cure, but it was you, a boy with nothing but knowledge gleaned from discarded books and an open heart, who showed me that true solutions often come from the most unexpected places. You taught me about real potential, not the kind measured by degrees or bank accounts, but the kind that burns within, unseen." Elias looked at Julian, his gaze thoughtful. "And you, sir," he replied. "You taught me that even the most powerful people can be kind, and that sometimes the greatest help comes from those who are brave enough to believe in something impossible." He remembered Julian's leap of faith, his willingness to risk everything for Amelia. He had not just received help, he had been given an entirely new path, a chance to transcend his circumstances and use his unique gifts for the good of others. The quiet before the storm had given way to a profound, transformative peace, a new beginning where boundaries blurred and hope, once a luxury, became a shared reality. 5 years later, the sprawling Amelia Thorne Foundation for Integrative Medicine and Unconventional Research hummed with quiet purpose, a beacon of hope perched atop one of the city's most prestigious research towers. The air, once sterile with antiseptic, now carried the faint, invigorating scents of herbal compounds, ozone from advanced diagnostic equipment, and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee from the vibrant communal lounge. Elias, now a confident 17-year-old, moved through its gleaming corridors with an innate authority, his presence commanding respect from seasoned scientists and eager young interns alike. His once ragged clothes had been replaced by sharp, tailored suits, or more often, a crisp white lab coat bearing the Foundation's discreet logo. His eyes, still as piercing and intelligent as ever, now held not just quiet observation, but the focused intensity of a visionary, reflecting the profound joy and purpose that had blossomed in his life. He was no longer just the beggar boy who saw unseen truths. Elias was a prodigious anomaly, a self-taught medical savant who had not only graduated from a top-tier medical university with unheard-of speed and distinction, but was now spearheading research that bridged the gap between ancient healing wisdom and cutting-edge biotechnology. His unique ability to synthesize seemingly disparate fields, combining deep tissue manipulation techniques with advanced nerve imaging, and ancient herbal remedies with modern pharmacological analysis, had garnered international attention. The Thorne syndrome treatment, refined and meticulously documented, had been successfully replicated in several similar, previously uncurable cases, revolutionizing specific areas of neurology and physical therapy. His work, particularly his holistic approach to chronic, elusive conditions, was now published in leading medical journals, presented at prestigious conferences, and had even inspired new branches of academic study. He was, undeniably, a legend returned, flourishing in the most unexpected of environments. Amelia, now a vibrant 13-year-old, was a constant source of joy, a living testament to Elias's profound gift and Julian's audacious faith. Her laughter, clear and melodious, often echoed through the Foundation's bustling community spaces, where she frequently volunteered, playing with younger patients. She attended a top-tier performing arts school, where she thrived, showing an extraordinary talent for dance, a joyful irony that brought tears to Julian's eyes every time he saw her leap and twirl on stage. Their life together, with Julian acting as Elias's devoted mentor and financial backer, was one of genuine comfort, profound meaning, and boundless possibility, a testament to the transformative power of kindness and opportunity. Elias had not only escaped poverty, but had built a life of immense contribution and profound personal fulfillment, creating a ripple effect that touched countless others. But Elias's journey, like Julian's, hadn't ended with personal success. The indelible memory of his own desperate struggle, of life on the streets, fueled a deep, unwavering desire to pay it forward, to find and nurture other unseen potentials. He understood, more profoundly than most, the unseen battles waged in the quiet corners of the city, the hidden talents waiting to be discovered, the desperate needs lurking in the shadows. Leveraging the vast resources of the Amelia Thorne Foundation, Elias, with Julian's full support, had established a new, groundbreaking initiative, the Unseen Path Program. Its mission was audacious yet profoundly simple: to actively seek out and provide comprehensive educational, medical, and personal support to underprivileged children and young adults who showed exceptional, unconventional talents or profound unmet medical needs, especially those falling outside traditional institutional recognition. The program offered not just scholarships to the best schools and universities, but tailored mentorship, access to cutting-edge resources, and a holistic support system designed to help these unseen heroes lift themselves out of difficult circumstances and realize their full potential, just as Elias had. It established mobile clinics that visited underserved communities, offering free medical consultations and identifying individuals with unusual medical conditions that conventional systems might miss. It also ran a series of free community workshops, teaching basic anatomy, first aid, and the power of observation, subtly seeking out inquisitive minds like Elias's own. The Unseen Path program quickly gained traction, attracting both passionate volunteers and significant philanthropic investments, thanks in no small part to the tireless efforts of Julian Thorne, who became its primary public champion. Dr. Eleanor Vance, now completely transformed and a fervent believer in Elias's genius, served as the program's chief medical advisor. Her vast professional network and scientific rigor provided invaluable strategic guidance and academic credibility, allowing the unseen path to integrate its unconventional approaches within established medical ethics. Elias often spoke at fundraising galas and community outreach events, his personal narrative of desperation turned triumph serving as a potent beacon of hope. His quiet strength, his authentic voice, and his undeniable brilliance resonated deeply with audiences, inspiring thousands to believe in the power of unseen heroes and the possibility of radical change emerging from the most unlikely places. He spoke not of miraculous interventions, but of the ripple effect of a single act of compassion, the profound resilience of the human spirit, and the infinite, often overlooked potential residing within every individual, regardless of their origin. One sun-drenched afternoon, the vast panoramic windows of Elias's personal office within the Foundation headquarters filled with the warm, golden light of late summer. Elias sat at a sleek, minimalist desk, reviewing schematics for a new mobile clinic design. Beside his desk, on a small rustic wooden stand that contrasted sharply with the modern decor, rested his old, battered mobile phone. Its cracked screen, once a potent symbol of his hardship and the very instrument of his desperate plea, was now merely a relic, carefully preserved. It no longer functioned, but it was a powerful, tangible reminder of the turning point in his life. He often looked at it, a quiet moment of reflection on the long, improbable journey. The screen, though dark, displayed a faint, almost ghostly outline of the last message he had sent on that fateful night, a message he had never deleted, etched into his memory and the memory of the phone itself. "Please, baby needs formula, just enough for a can. Just enough. No money, Pulse help." He looked from the phone to a framed photo on his desk, a joyous, candid shot of Amelia, leaping gracefully mid-air during a recent dance recital, then out at the sprawling, vibrant city below, a city he now served. A deep, unburdened smile spread across his face, reaching his eyes, making them sparkle with a profound, quiet contentment. The desperation of that night, the gnawing fear, the crushing isolation of the alleyway, it all felt like a lifetime ago, a distant, almost dreamlike memory. That single accidental text message, sent into the void of desperation, had not only brought salvation, but had unlocked a future he couldn't have dared to dream of, a future that transcended his wildest imaginings. It had given him not just a second chance, but a second spring, a new season of boundless growth, purpose, and infinite possibility, not just for himself, but for countless others he would now reach. He had found not only help, but also his true calling, his voice as a healer and innovator, and a loving, supportive community that had become his chosen family. The ripples of one desperate plea, answered by an unexpected act of kindness, had indeed transformed into a powerful wave of change, spreading hope, knowledge, and healing far beyond his own remarkable life. The legend had truly returned, and his journey had only just begun. If Elias's story has stirred your heart and reminded you that courage can alter destinies, and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment below. Share this story with those who need inspiration, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss upcoming narratives that delve into the profound human spirit and the power of unseen heroes. Thank you for joining the journey.